Welcome to Movie Recap, and in today's video we'll be going through the 2022 thriller film Shattered. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. Young and wealthy businessman Chris Decker is having a video call with his beautiful wife Jamie regarding his signature for the divorce papers. She asked him to sign. The two are about to split up, but Chris is starting to have second thoughts about his divorce, so he says he could have fought harder to keep his family. Unfortunately, Jamie just encourages him to move on. Now, after their conversation, Jamie tucks her daughter Willow in bed while the child expresses how much she misses her dad. Jamie can only comfort her by telling her how much she loves her husband too. Chris drives through the pouring rain in a local convenience store to shop for some ice cream. There he notices a beautiful woman named SKKY who asks him for his opinion on the wine she's about to purchase. She explains that she's had a rough day, so Chris recommends her a bottle of Nebbiolo. The two introduce themselves to each other, and with that she leaves outside the convenience store. Chris sees Sky again as her Uber got cancelled, so he offers her a free ride to her apartment. There she explains that she got into a fight with a roommate and that she didn't want to spend the night with her, so he offers to take her to his house. The apartment owner, Ronald, observes her without being noticed from his house window, and he watches as Chris takes Sky in his car. The sheer luxury of Chris's home amazes Sky, and she believes that it belongs to his parents, but Chris says that the whole property is his. He's retired from Mac King security software applications, and that evidently made him a very pretty buck. In contrast, Sky used a model in the past, but she later moved to the countryside to find something more fulfilling. Deeper into the night, the two of them drink by the fireplace, and the intimacy between them is palpable. Chris and Sky lock lips with each other, and this quickly leads Sky moaning in bliss while racking Chris back and forth. The following morning, an alarm wakes Chris up to an empty bed while Sky arrives at her apartment. Ronald catches her attention, then mockingly spouts walk of shame. Sensing what she had done when she enters her apartment room, her roommate Lisa storms at her, worried sick because she didn't come home last night. Though Lisa's starting to go on about kicking her out of the apartment, Sky just brushes her off and enters the bedroom, closing the door while Lisa begs her to open in and talk to her. SKKY just lies in bed as her thoughts drift elsewhere. On the other hand, Chris is reminiscing the moments he shared with his daughter Willow. He could even hear her giggling voice during a night of loneliness. Chris visits a bar for a drink, and it just so happens that Sky is serving drinks there. She happily approaches him, and the two of them talk, but Chris bluntly tells her that he only decided to see her because his wife wished for him to move on. Catching her off guard, they continue their conversation even after Sky's shift has ended, and she confesses that she lied about having a family. She was actually in a foster home and grew up with several families that tried to adopt her, and she even calls herself damaged goods. Chris comforts her, explaining that his family was no good either. He became obsessed with security, which is one of the reasons behind he and his ex-wife's disputes. Suddenly Chris gets interrupted when he sees a man named Kurju trying to steal his car. Chris tries to stop him, but their altercation ends with Kurju breaking his right leg with a crowbar and running off. The crime has left Chris in a wheelchair with his casted leg, and Sky takes him home. The next morning he struggles to carry himself to the couch since his private nurse is yet to arrive, so a very sympathetic SKKY offers to take care of him. When Chris jokingly asks for her qualifications, she enticingly whispers that he could get it on with her before kissing him passionately, and so Chris accepts her offer and cancels his appointment with his private nurse. He entrusts his home passcodes to her, and SKKY leaves to retrieve her belongings from her home. Lisa waits for Sky's return in her apartment with Ronald watching her. He comments that she was doing good for herself before SKKY came into her life, but Lisa tells him to shut up as Sky arrives smirking at Ronald and saying he's just jealous. The two ignore Ronald, and Sky walks inside the apartment room to pack up her things. Lisa cries, demanding an explanation from Sky. Instead, she asks her to sit with her in bed, and SKKY kisses her lips, calming her down. A sleeping Chris is woken up by Sky's gentle voice seducing him already. Chris kisses her lips and begs her for more, and they fill the remaining hours by spending the night together. Lying down in bed, Chris tells SKKY that he loves her, and she responds that it's probably the drug side effect. He asks her if she would feel the same way, but she confesses that she already loves him. Ronald bangs on Lisa's apartment door, asks King for the rent, but when he doesn't receive a response, he forces it open. To his utter shock, he finds Lisa's dead body with both her wrists slit in a bathtub filled with blood. Meanwhile, Sky's testing the face security scanner just as Chris was whacking up. Detective Lane interviews Ronald regarding Lisa's death, suspecting that she was murdered. Ronald believes that she had killed herself after her lover Sky left her in such a depressed state. The detective isn't convinced though, since he can't find any trace of a woman named SKKY in their database. Their conversation is interrupted when the media arrives, but the detective gets upset with Ronald facing them only to blabber on about the apartment's history. Meanwhile, Jamie video calls Chris to follow up on their divorce papers, but he reasons that He can't do them right now. He shows his leg injury, so Jamie suggests having Willow visit him to cheer him up, and he agrees. But what surprises her more is learning that Chris has hired a private nurse for his leg, since she knows full well that her ex-husband has trust issues. Chris then looks for Sky, who's currently taking a shower. With his curiosity and mistrust getting the better of him, he finds her bag and snoops around, eventually finding a photo of her with Lisa, but Sky would then catch him in the act, so Chris is left with no choice to admit to what he was doing. Matt King her smile and say that she'd have done the same thing. She then throws her towel at him. Matt King Chris dry her up, and they end up racking the bed back and forth with her wild steamy hormone sandwich. At night, Sky enters Willow's old room singing a lullaby and lying down to sleep. The following morning, Chris wakes up in a panic and frantically looks for his missing phone. He strolls around the house with his crutches to check his tablet, but the device isn't working. Then he sees that the television's on, reporting Lisa's mysterious passing with the question murder or suicide flashing. Chris instantly recognizes her as the girl from Sky's photo, but he gets distracted when she suddenly arrives bringing him breakfast. After looking for his phone again, Chris mentions the news, saying that she should contact the cops. However, Sky would simply admit to murdering Lisa, and she gazes menacingly upon Chris while commenting on how the chicken tastes. Chris is understandably baffled, so Sky explains that Lisa was nosy and jealous, but since she had the apartment SKKY stayed with her to spy on Chris's house through a telescope for the past 2 months, she's been doing her homework, studying him and figuring out how to gain his trust. Chris is absolutely disheartened to learn this, and he shouts at SKKY to get out of his property. Unmoved, Sky simply smiles at him, and when he tries to escape, she uses his phone to lock the doors and trap Chris there with her. He demands her to give his phone back, but Sky just tases him. Matt King him fall to the floor, and able to recover because of his injured leg. Chris gets tossed again, and soon he's knocked unconscious. Back at the apartment, Ronald is cleaning Lisa's room when he finds the telescope that Sky used to spy on Chris. He then spies on the other houses with it, and upon seeing a naked lady, he hurriedly grabs a chair to watch. Meanwhile, Sky ties Chris to a wheelchair and interrogates him about his security codes. He refuses to cooperate, however, so Sky kicks him to the floor and tortures him with an electric drill. After his little bit of voyeurism, Ronald moves the angle of the telescope, and he ends up Pete King at SKKY getting dressed after torturing Chris. As for Sky, she's happily transferring Chris's money to her account. Morning comes with Chris in agonizing pain as Ronald watches. Sky fixes Chris up to make him look presentable for the bankers and brokers. She plans on liquidating his stocks to fund her own self-made company, but Chris isn't having any of that. He struggles to escape and even attempts to choke Sky, but she just stabs his chest with a pair of scissors. After threatening to hurt his family if he doesn't cooperate, she proceeds to tack away all his gadgets, unplug every security wiring, then tack pictures of his art collection. Later on, some people start to arrive, and Chris gets hopeful only to get crushed upon seeing Kurju. She then gives him a rundown on what they'll be selling from Chris's possessions. Sometime after, Ronald's secretly waiting in his car while Sky leaves the house. She made sure to leave Chris's mouth with duct tape, rendering his screams for help fuel, thinking that